In this video, how I took my truck from wrecked to looking brand new again, DIY.
Well, I got myself into a little fender bender this week. Honestly, it's not too bad, all things considered, and it could have been a whole lot worse. I'm confident the Lord above was looking out for us. I'm also confident this truck probably saved us from being a whole lot worse and could be a little dramatic, could have potentially saved our lives. How it handled this little fender bender was amazing.
I bent it up on the side of the road to try to make it a little bit better just to get back home. But as you can see here, right here, this little part here is actually tucked just behind the front of the car, and I kind of bent that in, again, on the side of the road just to kind of give it a little bit of space. You can kind of see there, that's a little bit more what it looked like on the fly. And actually being said, I think this part here was probably closer out about here. It was pretty far out. It got bent pretty good that I was able to bend back in this way, literally on the side of the road. I was able to physically grab and pull out. It was also pushed probably back in another 4 or 5 inches. So you can see there, I've got multiple layers of metal built. I've actually got my fender pretty scraped up there pretty good. And then, of course, it looks like I've broken out my light. But all that being said, the light actually still works, so that's pretty nice. And then I've got a little bit more scraping here down underneath. Then some pretty good gouges here on the metal of the bumper, and then also up here.
I think the steel frame of the truck really saved us from being a whole lot worse. I think in another vehicle with a fiberglass frame, we could legitimately talk about this being totaled. Now I have pretty big scrapes here. I mean, it took out chunks, and it's also scratched up here pretty good. That's steel. That's really thick, heavy steel. So this guardrail that I ran into should have just decimated this truck, but the fact that I have this here really saved me.
And in addition to, of course, this side being knocked out, it actually bumped out this little cantrail because those are actually connected now thanks to the new safety recall they adjusted. So I'll have to figure out a way to fix that gap in addition to getting this bottom part pushed into the middle.
And I do have a little bit of extra wrap that I'll be redoing at least this portion of, and I think I have enough to do that whole front piece.
Now this whole plastic flaring, of course, was also pulled off. In fact, it was hanging on literally just by the camera. It was nice that I had that, or I probably would have lost that a few hundred yards down the road also. But this snapped back on mostly over the course of this section of where it's messed up here in the front. Of course, I have insurance and I filed a claim, but I haven't quite gotten into all that yet. In the meantime, I'm going to see what I can do to make it look better and see if, man, do I even need to make a claim or not? I'm guessing I can make it look okay. Let's find out.
Okay, so as we get into it here, this part just rattles around. I'm pretty sure that shouldn't be doing that.
Then you'll see here the truck actually has 2 pieces of metal, an inner and an outer. This inner piece got all rolled around and the light got broken up, although the actual light itself does still come on. So of course I don't know exactly where to attack this, so I started by just grabbing my channel locks and bending this little middle layer in so it's a little bit more flat with this outer layer. But I realized pretty early on I'm gonna have to remove this whole shell, which is fine because I've done this now several times. Just a little piece on the top and this bit of piece on the bottom. So I realized that if I pull this little plastic back, of course, some little plastic clips and rivets are broken out. That's not such a big deal. And there is a little metal bolt down here that was actually, the head of it was in between the 2 pieces of metal. And of course, it pulled through this inner sheet of metal, so I have to fix that. But actually this bolt up top, which I was encouraged, seemed like it was pretty good shape. And then comparing it to one on the left, it's at that same goofy angle, so I felt good about that. So next, I need to pop off this little plastic fender. It was mostly still intact. I thought at first that I bent this frame up. That wouldn't be good, but I compared it to the other side, it's at the same slope, so good. No structural damage, so I thought it was interesting. I sheared off some of this plastic, so about 1/3 of this shroud just isn't gonna clip back on just right, but we'll figure that out.
It just looks like I gotta knock that corner panel in a little bit, so I'm gonna use the real scientific approach of hitting it with a sledgehammer. But in all seriousness, it's a dead blow mallet, so it's rubber on the end. I'll probably still put some kind of cloth so it's not making indentions, although I'm not terribly worried about scratching it because I can always replace that piece of vinyl.
So you'll see I start off here with a little rag, making just really direct but pronounced blows. I started off nice and easy, and you'll see I slowly progressed onto bigger things, just randomly bending it and shoving it using my whole body weight. So what made this tricky was it actually bent twice. There was an upper bend up closer to that little like kind of a U cutout. And then there was a lower bend that I just had to actually just twist out. So I tried everything here. Obviously I have a little crowbar trying to pry out this little part. And it's neat that actually every little adjustment I made did actually help so slightly. And then again, here I'm just using a piece of wood trying to create like a new pivot point so I can almost like reverse crease it on the bottom side. This little screw down here I took out was actually connecting the 2 pieces of steel together, the inner and the outer. And taking that out allowed it all to flex because when it bent, it all bent together. And so separating them allowed me to bend them separately. That actually helped quite a bit. Again, back to the old mallet. You can see I ditched the towel. I'm just banging on it now. Then also a lot of talk about these cantrails lately. So this upper piece got separated a little bit too. Now, again, on the road, it looked like it came loose a lot and I was able to tighten a little nut down because they actually just added a stud and a nut to mine on a recent service appointment. So actually I undid that all together and I kind of just shoved it all back into place. And this actually made it set, honestly, I think it sets better now than it did when I first got it well over a year ago. So I just kind of knocked these around, got them in place, and then put that little nut back on the backside of that stud screw. I was gonna have to get this little frunk out. And again, right after the accident, this was pushed in about 3 inches. I was able to pull it most of the way out. I still had about maybe an inch to go. So it's kind of whacked and bent on this, as you can see here. I was able to get this pretty good.
All right, just went out and grabbed a couple things at Home Depot because I think I've gotten to the point where I realize I'm not gonna be able to fully bang this in to hold still, right? It's warped metal, and metal has a memory now. It's been like this for 24 hours. I just don't think I'm gonna be able to bend that in as it is. Now, I'm sure if somebody had better tools and machinery, they could. I went and picked up some threaded rod. So I'm gonna use this as basically a long bolt to kind of run it through one of these holes here. And then I'm gonna run it through one of the holes in the truck and then hopefully suck it back in to where it'll hold where it looks, if not perfect, quite a bit better.
All right, so I do have the pre-existing holes here. So one of those I'm gonna tap to go back in with that nut I took out, and that's just gonna hold these two pieces of metal together. So I'm gonna go through this bottom hole and run it all the way through here, and actually it's gonna line up pretty good with this hole here, as you'll see here in a second.
So again, it doesn't line up quite perfect, but good enough. I just have to actually warp this rod a little bit, but it won't matter once it gets tight. So once I feed it all the way through, including this outside, I just put a large fender washer, then a little nut. Once I get that, I pull it. And this isn't difficult because, as you can see, I can flex this steel all along. So I can just physically push it. Then it's just a matter of threading this long nut all the way down the threaded rod. I didn't want to cut it just yet because I wasn't sure how much extra I was going to be, and I needed to eliminate it so there wasn't just too much extra. So now it's a matter of putting the front down and seeing how it all lined up. And as you can see, I made some progress.
So with this bottom bolt in, I was able to suck this in quite a bit. In fact, it pulled it in probably about 5 inches, but if you still notice there, I've got this middle part to pull up in. So I'm gonna have another leverage point. I'm thinking somewhere around here. So what I'm gonna do is stretch a piece of steel this whole length. I'm gonna cut it to exact length. Then there's actually another little point I think I can get inside here. But I'm basically gonna use this little piece of steel as two things. One, basically a large washer, but also I'm thinking that way it'll help pull in uniformly all the way across this, where it actually has several different little warps and bends to it.
So this is just a little piece of flat stock steel. Again, I also got from Home Depot. I'm just gonna mark it to fit almost exactly to fit. I'm gonna cut it with the Sawzall. Then it was a matter of just lining it up, and I marked the 2 holes. The one in the middle, the new hole is gonna make, and the one that's gonna go down that bottom through the piece of threaded rod I already put there. That way it's pulling uniformly. Then I'm just gonna matter of drilling the 2 holes out. I started with a smaller bit and stepped it up to each of those. Once I got those holes drilled, it's a matter of just lining it back up and seeing if it indeed does pull in. So again, undid that bottom screw. I put this little piece of flat stock back on there. Now it was a little bit more strength. I could tell right away it was gonna pull much more evenly, which was good. Now I felt like I'd gotten that bottom rod as tight as I would ever need to get it. So now I went ahead and cut this off flush with the Sawzall. Now I fed a second threaded rod now through this upper little hole I just created. Again, I still used the fender washer, but really this flat stock steel was gonna hold as a washer also. And you can see there, even by that, how much, just as I'm screwing this in, you watch it all kind of suck in. Then you see those 2 little rods really holding it now from 2 different angles. There's my cousin Zach, shout out. Then it was a matter of I had to get these nuts tight. Now this part was a lot more difficult. Unlike the bottom, now each turn was really tight, so I had to get something like a little pliers and eventually vice grips to hold back while I was tightening these. Now when you shut it, you can see I've made up ground, but almost too much ground. So now the bottom is overly sucked in, so I have to let some of this back out. But also, in addition to letting it out, the tighter I get the middle one, or the one closer to the wheel, it kind of pushes this out. And then I'm just, as you can see here, pulling on this frunk a little bit more, because the tighter I get the sidewall to the corner, it exposes how much this little frunk is bent. But that was able to just kind of pull out. Again, just a matter of tightening these nuts to where you get it where I feel better about it. Now, after a few minutes, I noticed why I wasn't totally getting tight is this little stud into here, which was originally washered in between the 2 pieces of steel to the outside frame, was pulled in. And because it shifted a little bit, it was no longer in the designed hole. So pulling that out actually helped it all suck in better. As you can see, went back to the old trusty mallet, was able to knock this in a little bit more. But this is important. It also became more clear that I no longer needed to suck the bottom in. In fact, I needed to push the bottom out. So I ended up putting a double set of nuts on the outside, and eventually I put a double set of nuts there on the inside little circle onto the steel of the truck. This actually pushed it out and gave it kind of like a stiff leg. So while I even beat on the upper part, the bottom part was secured in with that little threaded rod. And after adjusting that little inside piece of steel, I realized I'm actually backing this nut back out. And this is also going to help pinch those 2 little warped pieces of steel together. The fact that there's a nut on both the outside and the inside. And now while I'm holding it with that little threaded rod as a stiff leg, now when I bang on it, it's actually starting to level this all out so it looks even. Then of course I just nicely took these little channel locks and beat the tip of this. So again, this all kind of helped bend it back into place with those two pieces of metal. With that stiff leg, it now reacts different when I hit the steel with this mallet. So once again, it's closed, and here's the look. Now you can see nearly perfect, especially on the edge. And now I was gonna finish up this front piece, which consists of pulling off the wrap. I don't know if you ever tried to pull a wrap off a car before. Not as easy as it looks. But that being said, I think it should be hard because you don't want it to fall off. So I just pulled this off one by one. It was mostly easy, just effort until I got to the end. Now the end here was all scratched up with, again, the metal of this guardrail that I went into. And actually the wrap was kind of stuck and ground down into this. So I just got it off the best I could. And then I knew I was gonna have to get those scratches out. So I went and grabbed an orbital sander. Now I have some really nice sandpaper that I got, and I'll put the link if you're interested down below. This is a really expensive paper that I got designed for stainless steel. I ended up using 3 different grades of sandpaper. Again, I already had this from a time where I had previously sanded down my hood after I scratched it up. That's a different story for a different day. But I started with obviously a heavier grit, and I worked my way all the way down to a little bit finer grit. Now, I skipped a bunch of this and it's all sped up, but I probably spent about an hour sanding this down, which is quite a long time. And thinking about this is like 1 square foot of area I'm sanding down, but I really wanted to get all those scratches out. And that worked so well, I switched to a little bit rougher grade of sandpaper and then just sanded down all the scratches out of this little cover. This wheel shroud, oddly enough, took me just as long, or if not longer, to get these scratches out. And I think part of that reason was the scratches in this wheel shroud were much deeper. But nonetheless, same thing. I did it with a rougher grade and then got a little bit finer one at the end. It doesn't match the other ones, but I tried to do my best to blend it. And then while I was at it, went ahead and sanded down these deep scratches here on the bottom plastic of this. This one I ended up sanding just the entire bumper because I knew it wouldn't match unless I got it all, and you'll never see both sides at the same time. Again, I used 2 separate grits of paper. Started with a rougher one, and once I got all the deep scratches out, I switched up that paper to a really fine one, and this gave it a really nice, smooth finish.
So I was pretty sure I had enough wrap to do this before I started. Now in hindsight, I probably should have measured. Turns out I do, but it was really, really close. Piece that was just under 80 inches long by about 13 inches high. So now I'm gonna go ahead and throw this one back on.
Now the timing on this was okay since I had actually just wrapped the truck myself about a month ago. Now I don't have a ton of experience doing this, but I learned a lot from that installation, which I made a video on that also if you want to see that. Now the last time I did this, I had a DIY kit that was pre-cut that I got from Hand Show, which again, I'm really happy with. Check out that previous video. But that gave me the experience to do this. The only thing different about this time was I actually had to cut around all the different edges. But that being said, I wasn't too worried about it, got it all smoothed out, and I think I actually did a better job installing this one than I did the previous one. So there's that too. Also, the benefit of doing it yourself DIY is you do have a little extra like this that you wouldn't have had you gone to a shop. So I did have to just trim off the extra, just the surplus at least. Now eventually I knew I'd get it tight, but I had to get off the big from the get-go. I cut this little threaded rod, now that it was done there, snapped my little wheel shroud back on. At this point I'm getting really excited about what I've done. Took a second to admire where I was at in the process. Again, that little stiff leg, sucking it in, that top bolt in and out, got this really straight. Now it's a matter of just reassembling most things, putting that little shell frunk back into place. That big shell goes in with, I think, 6 different 10mm bolts. Nothing too complicated. Then it was a matter of trimming down this little wrap precisely. Now I have a knife that was recommended by somebody I watched do a tutorial on YouTube that I got from Amazon, but I have found out with my little experience, it's really important to use a sharp knife. And this is a little trickier than you would think to get this exactly tight. But all in all, really happy with the outcome.
I think the worst is over, but if you can see this little bar behind me, this side here is definitely out a little bit more. So I'm just gonna see if I can't knock that out a little bit to match.
So if we look at this from the top, I'm gonna back out a little bit here. You can see, sure enough, the side that's on the left of your screen is knocked out a little bit more. So I'm just gonna whack this around with a little baby sledge. And it never quite works as well as I would like. One reason is because it's just anchored here in that right. It's not anchored anywhere here in the middle, so it just kind of flexes out. So I have to kind of hold it back with my body, then hit it. And that actually worked a little bit. And then I just went with the old-fashioned yank it around as much as you can. And actually, I think that did more damage, especially using my foot as a point of leverage, was actually able to bend it the most. So not perfect, but at the end of the day, world's better. And of course, before the big reveal, I had to go wipe all that mud off I got on there from that ditch.
So now that I've got it all washed, it's looking really good. Just one of the few things I have left to do is it pulled out this whole skirting underneath when I was going through that mud. So I bought a bunch of rivets that I got from Harbor Freight. So I'm gonna try to see if these will match up, or I can stick this all back in. Because right now it drives fine, but I'm rubbing the wheel as I'm turning just because that skirt is just kind of falling. I'll show you.
Now the corner of the skirt kind of tucks in, at least I tucked this back in after it ripped out. but I have to rivet these back in. And it made it even tighter when I turned because I just got brand new tires for the truck, which, by the way, subscribe, so I'll talk about which tires I actually decided to put on there and why. So I picked up a little pack of rivets from Harbor Freight, and this really worked to pin all that skirt back up into place.
Said and done, I'm pretty happy with all it all turned out. Now, I'll definitely be looking into this farther, filing that claim, and I'll put it on another video. So if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Let you see what other kind of circumstances I get myself into. But I'd love to hear how much you think this is going to be to repair. My guess is somewhere around $8,000 to $10,000. We'll see. But all said and done, I think I'm out the door maybe $120 between Harbor Freight and Home Depot. So not too bad for considering what it looks like here, and all the car still functions just like as it should. And I definitely have a few other things to clean up. I'll also do that on another video. Again, whether insurance covers this or not, or I decide to go through insurance or not. And the good news is, now that I got it banged up a little bit, I'm a little braver as what I'm willing to try to do with it. So thanks for watching this far. What's your guess? How much? See you on the next one.